Alright guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video, we are going to talk about pressure tanks. So if you don't know what a pressure tank is, I was in the same boat as you about 3 or 4 days ago. I'm a city boy. Everywhere I've been raised, I have been on city water. I've never lived anywhere where I've been on my own well before, so I didn't know anything about pressure tanks, how they worked, or how you wire them up. Or plumb them up. So today we are going to walk through this pressure tank and how we set it up over the past couple days. So he is not here right now, but my dad's been out here for the past 3 or 4 days, and we were working on this and got this all figured out. So I'm going to just jump in and kind of show you the end result of how we plumbed in and wired in our pressure tank. All right, guys, so this is a pressure tank. So if you don't know what a pressure tank is essentially an accumulator which provides water to your house whenever you open a faucet. So your pressure tank provides the pressure, the high pressure water for when you open the tap. The pressure tank is what pushes water out to your house. It is not the pump. So essentially what a pressure tank is it's this tank, but inside this tank there is a rubber bladder. And this rubber bladder you fill from the top up here with air. And you fill that rubber bladder with air up to a certain pressure. And then when your pump kicks in, it actually pumps water into the tank, which compresses all that air and pushes that bladder up. And then whenever you turn on a faucet, that air, that compressed air pressure, that expanding air is what forces water out of your pressure tank and into your house. And what happens there is that gives you a pressure range. This pressure tank is set for a 30 to 50 psi range, so that the pump kicks on to fill the tank until the pressure in the tank reaches 50 psi, and then you turn a faucet on and it'll drain water out of this tank, and that air will expand and drop pressure until it gets to 30 psi. And at 30 psi, the pump will kick back on and refill the pressure tank with water. So that is our working pressure range for this pressure tank, and it keeps your pump from continuously having to kick on, kick off, kick on, kick off every time someone opens a faucet. This way, you run your pump less and you increase the life of your pump. All right, guys, let's start with the water inlet. If you remember from my previous videos, here is the kind of distribution manifold that the plumber plumbed in prior to me showing up. So this 1-inch PEX line coming up here is straight from the well. And originally, scoot up, this 1-inch PEX line had an elbow that tied into this manifold, and then all of these runs distribute water to the rest of the house. So what I have done now, just temporary, is I have cut this off to isolate the water from the rest of the house. And the main reason I did that is because while I'm working on this house over the winter, I would like to have running water to the RV, but I can't have water be getting in to all these lines because I don't have a heater in the building yet. So if I'm not here working on it and it gets below freezing and I bust all these lines, I'm going to be in a world of hurt. So everything that I've plumbed in is to run water to the RV, but it's also, we plumbed it up in a temporary way such that we can winterize it and drain all the lines to a point where they won't freeze. So here's where we are right now. So this line coming up is 1-inch PEX, water straight from the well. Okay, so the water is coming up from the well, and we added these 2 quarter-turn ball valves as isolation valves around the well. So the water comes up here. This ball valve will almost always stay open. This one will almost always stay closed, or you just spray water straight out the top of it if it wasn't. But the water comes down here through these lines, and these lines are all temporary and run into the pressure tank. So as we scoot out, this This line coming down, over, and down are just temporary lines for me to run water to the pressure tank. And the whole goal of this whole plumbing configuration is to get water to this hose. Because now I can run this hose over to my RV, which has a hot water heater and drains and everything, and we can have running hot and cold water while I am working on finishing out the living space. So the whole purpose, the only thing I'm plumbed in right now is this hose just to provide well water to the RV. But we can go down here and we can kind of look at the plumbing fixtures going in to the pressure tank. So coming into the pressure tank, the first things you run into is you have a gauge, which is a pressure gauge that will be showing what the pressure is inside the pressure tank. You have I should point at these things. So a gauge, you have a pressure relief valve that will pop and spray water all over the floor, because I haven't run it anywhere yet, but that'll spray water all over the floor if you get over a certain pressure so that you don't rupture your pressure tank. You come over here, you have a garden hose spigot, which is just the valve that I'm going to turn on and off to run water to the pump. We have the pressure control switch, or the pressure control switch, which tells the pump to kick on and off, and then of course you tie into the pressure tank. This other side I have just plugged for now. It is not going to be in use. So eventually what the plan will be is where the water comes out up from the slab, it'll run, the very first thing it'll run through will be a water softener, and there'll be a bypass around the water softener, and then it'll run into either the pressure tank or the distribution manifold on the other side. It doesn't really matter where the pressure tank is, as long as it's on the high pressure manifold kind of side. So I can put the pressure tank on this side of the manifold, or around here on this side of the manifold. It really doesn't matter. And then also from the high pressure outlet, we'll go tie into a hot water heater wherever I decide to place the hot water heater, which will then come back down and tie into our hot distribution manifold, which distributes the hot to the rest of the house. So there will eventually be, right here, there will be a utility closet which will have a water softener, the pressure tank, and a hot water heater in it to provide, softened hot and cold water to the living space. Okay, next thing we want to talk about is the electrical. So we have the plumbing done, but something has to tell the well pump to kick on and off. And that is what we're going to go over now. Before we go over this, I have to say I am not a licensed electrician. Do not take anything that I have as professional advice about how to do your own electrical work. This is something that we did and we tested and it works, and we 99% sure that I wired it up right, but don't take this as a how-to video about how to wire in your own pressure tank. I'm going to show you how I wired in mine, and that's the way it's going to work for us. So coming in from this wall here, this is the power line that runs to the well pump, which is a downhole well pump. You come over here, and this is where the line terminated from the guys that ran the power to the pump, and it was run using a cable like this, a 4-line 10 gauge wire cable, because it's a 220 volt pump. So I tied that into another 10 gauge 4-line Romex cable, and you have it running over here, and it ties in to some stuff. We're going to come back to that stuff. Okay, the other side, so that's the end goal. We want power going to the pump when we want it to. So we want the pump on when this pressure tank hits 30 psi. We want the pump off when this pressure tank hits 50 psi. So we need power going there. And where does power come from? Power comes from the breaker box. So we added a 220 volt 20 amp breaker for the well pump in I'm not gonna show you how to wire in a 220 volt breaker. There's lots of YouTube videos about how to do that. But we're having, so this is the power coming out. Same kind of 4-strand, 10-3 cable coming in to this. And this is the control box for the pump, if you will. So this power comes in from the box here, and then it leaves the box back here and goes to the pump. So we wired this in directly following the wiring diagram that came with the box. So the box had a wiring diagram that came with it, and we followed this to the T. Well, all right, so we have power from the breaker coming in to our control box. I don't know what you really call that, but I'm gonna call this the control box. And then on the outside, or outlet of the box, we have power that goes to the pump. And then we have a third line that comes in here. That comes in here, and this communicates to the pressure control switch. So this switch is what tells this box when to send power to the pump and when not to send power to the pump. So we have power from the breaker, comes in here, comes in here. We have our 2 hots tie in to line 1 and line 2, and we have our neutral and our ground are both grounded over here. Now coming from the pump side, we have our black, our 2 hots going black to black, red to red. We have our neutral tied into yellow, and we have a ground tied into the ground box over here. And then coming from the pressure control switch, we have our neutral comes in and ties in to L2, and we have the black ties into the switch, and the ground gets grounded. So now I am certainly not an electrical expert, and this is kind of out of my forte. My dad actually did a bunch of this wiring, but essentially we just followed this wiring diagram that was on the inside of the cover of the box. So essentially what happens is when this pressure switch tells this box to send power to the pump, it sends power to a relay. The relay closes, and it jumps power from the breaker box, from the load center over to the pump wire. Over here we have the pressure switch, and the pressure switch has these 2 adjustable screws. One is the low pressure screw, one is the high pressure screw, so you can actually tweak these nuts up and down to change that 30-50 psi setting. But essentially what happens when you want the pump to kick on, so right now there's no pressure in the pressure tank at all, which is telling the pressure tank to run. Once it gets to 50 psi, the pressure will open these contacts. So these contacts will open, and it will tell the pump to stop sending, or it will shut the pump off to stop sending water to the pressure tank. Once it drops down to 30 psi, these contacts close, pump kicks on, brings water into the pressure tank until the pressure hits to 50 psi, and those contacts open to shut the pump back off. So anytime, so that's essentially a poor man, layman's explanation of how this pressure tank system works. Now the wiring diagram for that was on the instructions for this box. So we essentially wired both these things up the exact way that the wiring diagrams on the boxes showed us to wire them up. Now, all right, so let's talk about winterizing and how we can keep all of this stuff from freezing. So essentially the process that we have for making sure there's no water in this and when I leave and go away during the winter is you go up here and you make sure that the breaker is off on the pump like it is now. That way the pump will not ever get any power to pump water into the system. you go ahead and with the pump off, you can open this hose, open the spigot, and the compressed air in the bladder in the tank will force all the water out of the tank and out that hose. We then go over here and we can open this top valve, and I get a little air chuck just from my air compressor and air chuck, and I just hold my hand around it and we just blow all the water out of all of this line. So that blows all the water all the way down here to the T, and then blows all this line free and any residual water that maybe come from the tank, and then you just blow that out the spigot. So that means that our water level should be right here at this T, and we only have this about a foot worth of pipe with water that's exposed. So what we have, a big part of these ball valves, is I have this hand pump. And this hand pump I can do this. We take the suction line of the hand pump and we shove that down this line. All the way down to there, and I pump the water out into a bucket out this other end of this pump. So this line runs, probably a pretty good distance, probably 5 feet, maybe not quite 5, but probably close to 4. Let me see if I can stand on it. Yeah, probably close to 4 feet long. So that goes all the way down into the slab for a few feet, and you suck all the water out down to there, and then you hope that the lines that are down underground in the slab stay insulated enough to not freeze. So that was the design behind kind of all of this system in order to be able to winterize all of this when I'm gone and I'm not out here working on the house. Well, alright guys, it was a short video, but now you know everything that I know about pressure tanks. So with that,